Hi, I'm Steve Hampson. I'm the sweet pea guy here at Rogers Gardens, and today I'd like to give you a few tips about how you can grow great sweet peas at home. Just to give you a little background on the sweet pea, sweet peas, the original sweet pea is from Sicily. It was first described in the late 1600s by Francis Cupani, a Sicilian monk, and he found these growing in the wild. The original sweet pea was just a small little flower, probably about 2 flowers to the stem. It was sort of a bicolor flower, a mauve and a purple color. Wonderfully fragrant though, and he saw that this was a possible plant for gardens, so he sent seed to a correspondent in England, and from there the sweet peas really took off. As I say, originally there was just this one original sweet pea, but over the years, as they started growing them, some natural variations just started popping up in the garden. There was one called Painted Lady that appeared in the 1700s that was almost a white and a red color. And from there, other natural mutations just kept popping up. It wasn't until the 1800s, the late 1800s, that Henry Eckford, who's known as the father of the sweet pea, started breeding these and came up with all of a sudden all these different colors started appearing. And he called them Grandiflora sweet peas, and Grandiflora means large flowers because the flowers are actually larger than the Cupani's original sweet pea. Over the years, these started to be introduced into gardens, and in the early 1900s in England, there was a gardener for Earl Spencer who happened to be growing sweet peas, and he noticed one that had these wonderfully ruffled big flowers, and he called it Lady Spencer after the mistress of the estate. And since then, all the sweet pea flowers with large ruffled flowers are known as Spencer type. So these are the ones that most people are familiar with, the large frilly flowers. And we have a wonderful selection here at Rogers Gardens. I do the selecting of the seed every year. We actually send to England for the seed. One of the big growers is in England, and he has a wonderful variety of seeds. So we grow about 20 different varieties of sweet peas here every year. Wide range of colors. I've tested most of these in my garden at home. I grow about between 50 and 60 varieties every year of sweet peas, just to sort of test them. I have my own favorites that I grow every year, but I always like to try some new ones. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different varieties of sweet peas that you can get. So there are actually 2 types of sweet peas: early flowering and main season sweet peas. Most people don't grow the early flowering ones, but I have some of these at home. They're just coming into bloom. This is early January in Southern California, so mine are just starting to bloom at home. And the main season ones, which is what most people grow, which is what most of these here are, will bloom in usually starting in late March through April. The reason that the early flowering ones is that they're daylight sensitive. The early flowering ones take about 10 hours of daylight for them to bloom. They're triggered by the length of the day. The main season ones will not bloom until we reach about 12 hours. That's around the spring equinox. So in Southern California, that's usually around mid-March to late March is when the main season ones will start blooming. I usually like to start my seeds or my plants in the fall. The early flowering ones I try to get in September here. If you're in a colder climate, of course, you won't sow these till springtime after the snow is all melted and the temperature warms up. But in a milder climate, I like to sow them in late September, and if I get them in the ground, I can usually, in past years, I've gotten them to bloom by Christmas time. The main season ones I'm not so concerned about when I sow them. I usually sow the seed October, November, but you can even sow them into January, and if you live in a cooler area along the coast here, you can probably sow them up until February and still get flowers for the springtime. Sweet peas are a cool season crop. They do not like our hot summer temperatures. It's only in much cooler climates, such as the Pacific Northwest or in England, where they usually don't get a lot of extreme temperatures, that they'll bloom into the summertime. Here, we can count on them blooming from, like I say, late March, maybe through early June, until the weather really heats up. For growing these, if you're sowing your own seed, there's always the myth that they need to be soaked or nicked, and that is really not a good thing to do. You can just plant them directly out of the packet, which is what I do. I like to sow mine in packs like this. So we have, eventually end up with plants like this. We have them in 4-inch pots at Rogers Gardens, and these will get off to a good start. These are already really starting to vine here. So these are ready to be planted in the garden. I've sown the seed directly in the garden before, but I had as much luck doing that. I don't know if mice find the seed, or when they first start coming up, birds sometimes come, and I've noticed will eat the young seedlings coming up. So I like to start mine if I'm doing it myself. If I'm doing my own seed, I like to start them in packs and transplant them out when they've gotten some size to it. Location where you want to plant these. Sweet peas do like full sun, but as long as you're getting at least a half-day sun, they'll do very well. One advantage of doing them in a half-shady location is that once we get into the heat of the summer, if you give them a location where they get half a day sun in the morning and they're shaded during the afternoon, the hot part of the day, the season will be extended a little bit. So I have them growing in locations where I have full sun and also with half sun. They both seem to do equally well, and I get just as many flowers in either location. They like a well-drained soil. So if you're, I use the same location every year. I do like to add a soil amendment. This is one of my favorites called Harvest Supreme, but anything, compost, any kind of really nice, loose, rich soil. So I just mix this in with my garden soil. It really lightens up the soil, adds organic matter, helps retain nutrients in the soil. So there are lots of reasons for adding some kind of organic matter. As I say, I like Harvest Supreme, but any of the bag products, the soil amendments are good, or if you have your own compost, you can't beat that. So I like to mix that into the soil. At the time of planting, I like to mix in a fertilizer, an all-purpose fertilizer. This is an organic one, it's an all-purpose one. I know it has a tomato on the front, but it's great for sweet peas too, and all kinds of other plants. So I like to give the plants a start initially, so I'll mix this into the soil when I'm mixing in my soil amendment. I like to space the plants about 10 to 12 inches apart. I do them in a row, and so 10 to 12 inches apart, it seems like a good spacing. These will, when they're happy, these will really grow. They get 6 to 8 feet tall, usually in a matter of months. So they really, that spacing, that foot spacing is, you could even space them farther apart if you wanted to, and they'd still fill in because you can get quite vigorous when they're growing well. Keep them evenly moist when they're planting. There can be a few insect problems, insects and slugs. Slugs can be a problem when they're very small. I use this Sluggo. There's Sluggo. Sluggo, which will take care of slugs and snails. Sluggo Plus will also take care of sow bugs and earwigs, which can also be a problem, but usually just the Sluggo. It's an organic product. It's safe to use around animals. The nice thing about it, it's safe to use around kids and animals. It's not going to hurt them like some of the other Sluggo or snail baits. Aphids can also be a problem. I like to use just a horticultural oil. This is an insect spray, and that'll usually take care of the aphids. It'll also take care of powdery mildew, which can be a problem later in the spring. The mildew can form on the leaves. You'll notice a white coating on the leaves, and normally a little bit isn't going to hurt it, but if it's too severe, it can really harm the plant. You can actually start defoliating the plant if it gets bad enough. And usually just an oil spray will also help keep that under control. As I mentioned, the sweet peas get pretty tall, at least 6 to 8 feet. I've had some that'll get up to about 10 feet in height when they're really growing vigorously. So you do need some kind of a support to grow them on. At home, I have a chain link fence. My property borders a walking trail, and so we have a 6-foot chain link fence, and that's ideal for growing them on. Even though it's 6 feet, by the end of the season they're up above it, but they just sort of fall down the other side. I also grow them on these obelisks in my front yard. And the thing is, the sweet peas, even though they're climbing, they have these tendrils. I've left this on purposely. These are last year's old tendrils. You can see how they're clinging. This is actually a polyethylene netting for growing plants on. And so this is ideal. These little tendrils can grab hold. I have this all the way down to the bottom. I had this obelisk, and I just wrapped this around here and secured it with some twistums at various places. It's strong enough, and as I say, this gets sunk in the ground. This is an 8-foot tall one. And so by the end of the season, the plants are up above the top of this obelisk. It's hard to believe, they grow so fast. But I usually put about, around this, about 4 or 5 plants, and that'll just fill this. It'll just completely cover it, and it'll give me lots of color for several months. Another thing I've used, you can use twigs. This is actually some bamboo. It was the neighbor's bamboo that actually started growing. Bamboo does, it spreads, it grew under the fence and started coming up in the property. It started becoming invasive, but I found out by cutting these, I pulled off all the leaves, and just these twiggy branches, this is ideal for these sweet peas to climb up on. And you don't have to use bamboo, you can use other twigs, branches from trees if you want. They do that a lot in England, it seems like. But anything that the sweet peas can grab hold of is really ideal. Thanks for watching today. I hope I've given you some good tips on how you too can grow some great sweet peas. It's taken me years to get to perfect this. I've been growing these for about 20 years. So if you'd like to see more videos such as this, you can like the Rogers Gardens homepage, and you can also follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and there'll be some YouTube videos also posted. Thank you.